Welcome to World Have Your Say. Let's talk about a film that's been watched by 50 million people in 3 days.
We have thousands of Kony 2012 bracelets that we want everyone to wear. Each bracelet has a unique ID number. Input that number and you enter the mission to make Kony famous.
On one level, the Make Kony Famous campaign has undeniably worked. More of you around the world are aware of Joseph Kony and his alleged war crimes than knew of him on Monday. But will it actually help to catch him or help the many victims of the Lord's Resistance Army? If you've watched it, we'd like to know what you made of the film. The text number and the phone number will be on the screen regularly throughout the programme. We're live here on BBC World News, so if you'd like to take part in World Have Your Say, wherever you are in the world, you are very welcome. Now, let me introduce you to our first three guests. Musa Okwonga is a Ugandan poet and writer. He's live with us from London. In Kampala is Rosebel Kagumire. She is also live with us. She's a blogger. Some of you may have read what she's had to say on this already. And Jane Busman is a comedy writer for South Park and The Fast Show, among other TV shows. She's also a journalist who's written extensively about Uganda, and she's live with us from Nairobi. Well, all three of you, thank you very much indeed. I'm very interested to hear you talk among yourselves. Rosebel, let me start with you. What do you make of this film?
I think it very much simplifies the idea, the war, and it paints a wrong picture of what is going on in Uganda currently. There is no war in Uganda. It fails to point out that people in northern Uganda, the condition is much more different from what he portrays in that film.
Jane, what about you?
Myself on the film? Well, as I said yesterday, I spent years trying to get the story in the British newspapers. The first time when I finally managed to get this story about 30,000 kidnapped African children into the British media, the only newspaper editor that would touch it was the travel page of the Mail on Sunday newspaper, which is a family British newspaper, so right of centre that their inaugural headline was "Black people, whose fault are they?" And obviously that's not true. It is true that the only people that were interested in a story like this, when it involved people who were essentially black and completely disenfranchised, was a travel section. I had to fudge it because, and to be honest, this film, if it's managed to get that number of people watching, 27 million or whatever it is now, 30, in that short amount of time, then fair play to them.
Musa?
I would say that this gives some much-needed, highly belated visibility to a really, really important issue. There are several key inaccuracies in the film, which we'll probably touch upon later, but for the time being, I'm just glad that people are talking about one of the worst, most tragic chapters in Uganda's recent history.
Well, I can see here that Christian in Berlin has posted on our Google Plus page saying, "This reminds me of Michael Moore or Morgan Spurlock, a brilliant use of social media to get the message across." And Sam has tweeted us from Dubai saying, "I watched the video in school and was deeply moved. It shows the new power of the internet." So, Rosebel, what would you say to this enthusiasm that we're hearing from some of our viewers?
I have no doubt that they wanted to show this plight, but I also want to know, want the people to know that the depiction of that film is not entirely true. That 30,000 children are not true. That was over years. Right now, we don't have, Kony does not even have 2,000 fighters as we talk. So when you're telling a story of a country and you're putting it backwards instead of telling the people the 2012 picture, it's really important. And I think that if you want to target millions of people, you better tell the entire truth about the country and its people.
Musa, do you think the film accurately portrayed the threat posed by Joseph Kony today?
No, I don't think it does, because, I mean, by several accounts, I think Michael Wilkerson wrote a fantastic piece, the Foreign Policy blog, saying that Kony hasn't been in Uganda since perhaps 2006. So to that extent, it's not accurate. This is largely a historic account of what he did. Having said that, the atrocities that he committed and was allowed to commit were very real, actually, and they should be examined further, I think.
And it is worth mentioning that Invisible Children, the charity based in San Diego behind this film, has put up a detailed response to a number of the criticisms which have been levelled against it this week. It's too long for me to read, but in response to that particular point, they say, of course, we had to simplify the story. It was a half-hour film designed for people who had never heard of Joseph Kony. The story is complicated, and of course, we understand that he has left Uganda and is probably now based in DR Congo or the Central African Republic. Now, let's put up a message for the three of you to respond to. Alda Silva's in Ontario, in Canada, tweeting us saying, this is called Slacktivism, the self-deluding idea that by sharing, liking or retweeting something, you are helping out. Jane in Nairobi, what about that?
Well, I should say that I went to an enormous event in Washington, D.C., unless I hallucinated the entire weekend, which is possible. I was surrounded by Californians, so I had to drink heavily for most of it. So as far as I recall, the result of that was the Lord's Resistance Army Act, so that was entirely achieved by these largely a bunch of kids who, frankly, you know, I'm 100 years old and communicate with my voice. They're terribly young and have agile thumbs and communicate with these electronic messages. And as a result of that, they were able to rally, you know, and there's no other way of putting it. It's an act. It's an American act of government. And that is not, you know, self-gratification. That's fact. That's history.
American acts of government are, of course, significant matters, but they don't necessarily mean one man is going to be caught faster or a whole swathe of victims are going to get help faster.
No, but it brings transparency to what I believe is the con of the century and the last century too. If only by having 27 people say, what? Are you sure this bloke got away with it for 27 years? And I might start to ask the question, how he got away with it, then it's a brilliant piece of advocacy.
Thank you very much for that comment, Jane. You're in Nairobi. Wherever you're watching World Have Your Say, we're live here on BBC World News. I know that we've had calls from Uganda. Well, we would expect that. Sudan, we'd expect that too, because the LRA has operated in the south of Sudan and Nigeria. Keep those calls coming. Country code 44 2070 83 72 72. And of course, one of the tactics of this charity was to get very, very high-profile celebrities to tweet about it. Let's have a look at some of them who have been endorsing the Stop Kony 2012 campaign. P. Diddy says, you must all see this now. If you don't know what Stop Kony 2012 is about, watch this, retweet it to the world. Popstar Rihanna said, please go to invisiblechildren.com, even if it's for 10 minutes. Trust me, you need to know about this. One love. And probably the king of Twitter, apart from maybe Lady Gaga, Justin Bieber tweeted, it's time to make him known. I'm calling on all my fans, friends and family to come together and stop Kony. And stop Rose Bell in Kampala. How does it make you feel when you hear those very, very well-known North American celebrities getting involved in something in the north of your country?
I will say that these are not the first efforts in Uganda. In 1996, when Joseph Kony abducted over 100 girls from Aboke, we had the headmistress and several women appear on Oprah's show. As far back as that, we had the late Pope John Paul II talk about it. He sent a message of peace, which is even inscribed in a stone or in that school. So what we are saying, we don't think that this celebrity activism can actually bring reality. We need more policies that can make a difference. We don't. At least most Ugandans do not think that just because Rihanna has learnt of Kony, who has existed for 25 years, that will bring him to an end.
Thank you very much, Rose Bell. If you're watching in Uganda, you can email us or text us. If you'd rather not call, we'll call you back. World Have Your Say at bbc.com is the email. The text number's on the screen quite regularly. The chief prosecutor at the ICC, the International Criminal Court, which wants to see Joseph Kony in court to face charges of crimes against humanity, Luis Moreno Ocampo, says this campaign has mobilized the world, so he has supported it. It is worth saying that we invited Invisible Children to contribute to this discussion. We've been asking them for the last 24 hours. They haven't been able to provide us with a guest. Musa, let me bring you back in. I wonder your emotions as you hear me reading out tweets from all of these celebrities from popular culture in North America talking about a man you've probably been aware of all of your life.
Well, to be honest, I think that any time people can be made aware of the abduction of children, the kidnapping of children, it's a good thing. And I actually have no particular criticism of the so-called Slacktivism movement. I think it's fantastic that celebrities can mobilise tens of millions of followers, many of whom are avid fans of theirs, to come together for a common cause. My real concern, as I've said before, is just the content of the piece. I think when you've got a campaign of this magnitude, you just need to get your facts absolutely right. And I'd just like to say this one extra thing, that I don't think it's a defence to say it's only half an hour, because I think the half-hour viral video actually carries an implication of a completeness, because it's very, very long for viral videos. So I think that actually the fact it's so long means they should have put more content there of greater diversity. So I think that's not necessarily something they can use in their defence, I'm afraid.
But do you really believe this is about making a change, or about the experience of trying to make a change? Because some would argue that by retweeting, by offering your support for this video, it makes you feel good, but actually has minimal impact on Uganda or Central African Republic or DR Congo.
I disagree. Say that to the activists right now in Syria. Say that to Tweets for Peace, who's tweeting out from Syria. Say that to Edward E. Dark, another Twitter handle. Say that to Angry Arabia in Bahrain, drawing attention to what's happening there with the protests. These people are relying on Twitter to get messages out, and I think it's very... I think we're going down dangerous ground if we start saying that social media of itself is a way of passing the buck. I think people are very aware that there's more to activism than just tweeting and retweeting, but it's a vital tool in the activist toolbox.
All right, well, you say it can lead to something. Jane in Nairobi, you've also already mentioned legislation in America, but what about in East Africa itself? How do you hope that this sudden awareness of Joseph Kony that's been created this week should be used in East Africa?
Well, arrest him. If you're going to arrest him, give him a shot at peace talks. It doesn't matter. But let's talk about, you know, what should be done about Joseph Kony and not the method. And it's like we're on the BBC World Service. It's going into 300 million homes, and we're sort of acting like the People's Front of Judea. It's, you know, it's the issue is stopping Kony in some way, shape or form. You know, if you can arrest him under the terms of the ICC, get out there and do it. You know, if the UPDF say they've been looking for him for 26 years and they can't find him, replace the UPDF with someone that, you know, can find, you know, anything, you know, a needle in a haystack, anything. You know, that's probably the wrong metaphor. But the point is, you know,
but the point is that since October 2011, there have been 100 American special forces trying to help find him, and they haven't managed it. So perhaps this isn't something with a military solution.
Yeah, well, that's because frankly, they're relying on a military solution, a military that hasn't caught him in 26 years. If they haven't caught him yet, they really don't want to. Museveni is the person responsible for stopping Joseph Kony and always has been. But Museveni has made billions out of Joseph Kony over the years. It just simply hasn't suited him. If you wanted to catch Joseph Kony by the end of next week, you do one thing. You cut off his aid budget. If you cut off his aid budget, Kony would be caught just like that. Simple as that. He's a cash cow.
Those of you watching, Jane, do you agree with her? Remember, you can speak to any of our guests. They're all live. Jane is in Nairobi, Rosebell is in Kampala, and Musa's live with us from London. I can see I've got calls here from Ghana, the US, the UK, Gambia, Cameroon and Lesotho. We'll try and speak to some of you in the next few minutes. We're going to take a break now for a couple of moments. Well, I was mentioning that we're getting an awful lot of calls. Let's cross to Nuala, who's with the World Have Your Say team, to hear some of what you're saying.
Well, Ros, that's right. Most of our calls are coming in from Africa at the moment. Abdul Kala in Ghana just got in touch. He feels very much everyone should watch the video. He feels very positive about it, and he thinks it's a powerful message. Mark Anthony, he's in the US. He doesn't agree. He thinks America has its own problems and they should worry about that before worrying about Joseph Kony or Uganda. Reese Fierro tweeted, look, if you don't want to support this cause, then don't. Don't worry, though. There's millions of people with hearts that are going to support the cause. And he had tweeted that. And Michelle Elise tweeted, she can't wait for her bracelets of Stop Kony to be delivered. So a lot of different opinions coming in on lots of different social media. Do get in touch. Facebook.com/World Have Your Say.
Nuala, thank you very much indeed. And if you would like to ring up the team, the number is on the screen throughout. I'm Ros Atkins. Thank you very much indeed for joining us live here on BBC World News. At this time of the week, it's always World Have Your Say, where we take one of the biggest talking points of the week. And of course, this Stop Kony campaign has gone from nowhere to being one of the biggest stories in the world in 3 days. Last time I looked, almost 50 million people had watched the film on YouTube. I'm sure many of you have already seen it. But do you approve of its techniques, its message? Do you think it will actually help bring Joseph Kony to a courtroom? Do call us up, text us. We're on Google+, Facebook and Twitter as well. Now let's bring in another guest to speak with everyone else. Michael Wilkerson is a freelance journalist. He wrote an article on the Foreign Policy blog. He also wrote for the Guardian newspaper as well today. Michael, thanks for being with us.
Thanks.
I read the headline of your article in the Guardian. It said Oprah and bracelets is not going to fix the problem of Joseph Kony. Tell us why.
Well, first of all, the money that is going to be collected from this movement is going to invisible children. And whatever laudable work they're doing, 2/3 of that is advocacy and awareness in the U.S. So I agree with what Jane said earlier, that a lot more pressure on the Ugandan government could perhaps have some better effect on the military side of things, but that's not where this money is going. And I think it creates a problem because whether or not invisible children tried to make people aware that the LRA is no longer in northern Uganda, they failed. I've had thousands and thousands of people saying, let's go fight Kony in northern Uganda and let's go help northern Uganda, and that's just simply not where the help needs to go right now.
Does it matter, though, so long as there's pressure to find him and the pressure is on people who know where to look?
Well, it matters for two reasons. One, because what is the pressure? The pressure is to continue doing what we're already doing, which is 100 U.S. military advisors. And I agree with Jane that more pressure should be on President Museveni in Uganda, but frankly, I disagree that he could catch Kony in a week now. 10 years ago, sure, absolutely, when the LRA was operating in northern Uganda. But not anymore, because the lawless area in eastern DRC, southern Sudan, and Central African Republic, where the LRA has been moving, is actually very difficult to move across, and you are working with a ragtag coalition of armies from those countries as well. So it's no longer so simple as put enough pressure on Museveni and tomorrow Joseph Kony will turn up.
Well, listening to you is Jane in Nairobi. She's a comedy writer. Jane, what would you like to say in response?
Well, I've been talking to people on the ground in affected areas like Dunga and in the various places in the DRC, and the message I get... Well, I'll tell you one conversation I had with a bloke who worked for the British government, and I'm, as always, baffled by the international response to Joseph Kony. And I said, look, about the kids still with him, why can't they get them back? And they said, well, because nobody knows where Joseph Kony is. And I said, all right, let me put it another way. If me, a white person, was kidnapped by Joseph Kony this afternoon, how would you get me back? And he said, we'd ask the local people. They know where he is. And I said, well, is anyone talking to these local people? He went, not really, no. So, and I also hear back that intelligence that they're getting good intelligence now, which actually is largely due to the Invisible Children's high-frequency radio program. So fair play to them. They are doing stuff on the ground. They're just not banging on about it as much as they should be doing right now. And this information is simply, the question now is will. The question is political will. Yeah, it's a wide area, but, if really we apply... Also, let's look at, another aspect. If we talk more about negotiated peace, if that were even on the table, to bring that in alongside, carrot and stick, whatever you want to call it. But, I've got lots of records of genuine attempts at peace early on in the campaign being not just even sabotaged by the Ugandan government, but blowing up priests. I don't like priests, but
well, and it's also worth pointing out that in 2008 we thought we were getting close to a deal with the Lord's Resistance Army, and Joseph Kony walked away at the last minute.
Yeah, but look at who were the talking peace. It was a bunch of crooks from London who actually are still walking around free, who in London live in dismal council housing, but got to live on the international community's expense with a per diem, a cash per diem of more than their housing benefit at home. It was a free holiday for a bunch of people who knew nothing and didn't even really have Joseph Kony's ear.
All right, well, let's pick up on there's a number of points there. Let's start first, Michael, with the point that if there was a political will to find this man, it's not about putting more people with guns on the ground. It would be very easy if the political will was there.
Well, I question that because I think more or less the political will is there. And there's no question that the Ugandan government has used the LRA as a cash cow in the past, and they're using support for the war on terror as a cash cow now, putting troops in Somalia and elsewhere. But what worries me about this video is not only that there's no immediate policy step for all the people who are suddenly aware, other than suddenly giving money to invisible children, it also worries me because it creates this narrative that for years, nobody could do anything and nobody knew anything. And then Invisible Children showed up and brought out the message, and now the West can come and save everybody. And I'm sorry that it was hard to get the LRA conflict on the pages of papers in London, but that doesn't mean that people didn't know about it and people weren't doing anything about it. And so now, yes, buy a wristband, but $2 out of every $3 that goes to do that is still going back into the United States for advocacy based on the Invisible Children's budgets today.
Well, all three of you, let me tell you, we've got calls coming in from Taiwan, Iraq, Qatar as well. I can see a message here from Anwar in Morocco. Uganda isn't the only country in Africa that uses child soldiers. The situation is rife without any one of those countries having tribal warfare. Thank you very much indeed for those calls and messages. I also want to read you this from Max Fisher. He writes in the Atlantic magazine, Africans in this telling are helpless victims and Westerners are the heroes. It's part of a long tradition of Western advocacy that has for centuries adopted some form of white man's burden. Rose Bell, what do you make of that?
Like Michael said, the story does not tell of any efforts by Ugandans. It just tells a heroic story of a guy who drops in 2003 and doesn't even mention that there have been people who have sacrificed their lives to try to talk to Joseph Kony. In 2008, I was in Juba myself. I covered the peace talks. And we all know that Joseph Kony killed his deputy because the deputy was more compromising.
Rosebell, we can talk about those particular circumstances, but I'm keen to just explore this issue a little further. Let's bring in Salome Lemmer, who's live with us from New York. Hi there, we found you on Twitter. Innovate Africa is your Twitter handle. You were discussing this. What about this particular issue that some Africans have, which is that this is white people once again taking it on themselves to fix Africa's problems? What do you make of that analysis?
Yeah, I agree with the quote that you just read by Max Fisher. I think, as Rosebell was saying, Africans and Ugandans in particular have been working on this issue for years. These are activists like Betty Bigombe, Concerned Parents Association, Concerned Children and Youth. I can list a number of young leaders and organizations and women and men, all people from Uganda who've been working on this issue for years. And in the video that Invisible Children put out, you don't see that. You don't hear from the African voices for whom this issue is very personal and very real.
And can I just add, let's get back to the facts of the video. It's only mentioned 15 minutes in that the LRA has left northern Uganda, and it doesn't say when. And defending that in the New York Times today in an interview, Jason Russell said he didn't want to make a boring Africa documentary. And I'm sorry, but in a 30-minute video, adding 2 more lines that say, in 2006, after many years of fighting with the Ugandan government, the LRA was pushed out is simply not that hard.
I'm Roz Atkins. Welcome to World Have Your Say. Well, there can't be many of you who haven't seen or at least heard about this film about Joseph Kony. He's the man accused of crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court. He's been wanted for many years, and the charity behind the film hopes that all of this attention will make his capture more likely. But is that really what's going to happen? Is this making a real difference or just making people feel good about trying to? If you've seen it, we want to know how you've reacted. You can get us on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, the phone, text and email. Well, World Have Your Say is live. We're taking your calls now. I can see we've had recent calls from India, Norway and Trinidad. Thank you very much indeed for those. You can also get me on Twitter at BBC Roz Atkins, and we're across the WHYS and the Kony 2012 hashtags. First, though, let's check in with the lead stories from the BBC newsroom. The UN humanitarian envoy Valerie Amos says the Syrian regime has agreed to join the UN in making a limited assessment of the situation in the country. Speaking in Turkey after visiting Syria, Baroness Amos said she'd requested unhindered humanitarian access, but the Syrian government had asked for more time to study the proposal that she had put to them. Eurozone finance ministers say that Greece will get the $47 billion in bailout money to fund its debt relief. The Greek finance minister has claimed that the participation of Greece's private sector creditors in the country's multi-billion euro bond swap exceeded all expectations. The Italian government's asking why Britain did not inform it about the attempted rescue of a British man and his Italian colleague who were being held in Nigeria. The Italian president called the behaviour of the British government inexplicable. Both hostages died in the operation. Some good news for President Obama and lots of people starting new jobs in the States. The US economy created 227,000 extra jobs in February, outstripping forecasts once again. Employment in the world's largest economy has been slowly but steadily rising over the past 6 months. And Japan's whaling fleet has ended its annual hunt in the Antarctic Ocean after catching less than a third of the whales intended. It's blaming poor weather conditions, but also the actions of anti-whaling activists. Campaigners have chased Japanese fleets across the Southern Ocean, trying to disrupt the hunts. We'll begin with Salome in New York, Michael, who's with us in Oxford, and Rosebell live from Uganda. But first of all, let's see a little bit from this film, which has caused all this fuss about Joseph Kony.
In furtherance of the Congress's stated policy, I have authorized a small number of U.S. forces to deploy to Central Africa to provide assistance to regional forces that are working toward the removal of Joseph Kony from the battlefield. Sincerely, Barack Obama.
Well, Blake in the UK has posted on our Facebook page. Let's see if we can pull that up. No, we can't. That's not to worry, but I'm going to get... Oh, we can. Here we go. There we go. Javi, let's have a look what he's saying. A Ugandan blogger has posted suggesting that the answer is more military action is just wrong. Have they thought of the consequences? Making Kony famous could make him stronger. Arguing for more US troops could make him scared and make him abduct more children or go on the offensive. Well, let's hear the three of you talk about that. Salome, you first. What did you make of that bit of the film when they start high-fiving and clapping at the news that there'll be a military deployment?
You know, I saw that portion of it, and I can understand why they're excited, especially given the course of that film. They feel like they've taken part in something that has been impactful. But again, my mind went straight to the people and the young people I met in Uganda who right now, when I was there last year, were telling me, we want to rebuild our schools. We want to learn. We want to have better access to technology. We want to rebuild our hospitals. They're thinking about moving forward. So I went straight back to the people again and wondered, what would they say right now? How would they react?
Michael?
I wholeheartedly agree. Beyond being concerned that awareness means more than just knowing Joseph Kony's name, I worry that defining Uganda to so many people, more than the population of Uganda have watched this movie, totally erases any discussion space for people who don't know very much about Uganda to focus on things like rebuilding northern Uganda or the fact that President Yoweri Museveni is not very democratic. And so I worry about the unintended consequences. Yes, advocacy is great. It's great to get rid of the LRA. It's great that people know who Joseph Kony is, but I worry about a half-informed mob being out there asking why we aren't getting rid of Joseph Kony and his army of 30,000 mindless child soldiers, you know, and that's just another false thing that Invisible Children didn't intentionally create, but that's what people are reading out of their film. 30,000 people have been abducted over the course of the LRA's existence. There are only a few hundred now.
Michael, thank you very much indeed. As you're talking, we can see pictures of people putting up posters. April 12th, 2011, Kony posters. That's when the people, the Invisible Children, the charity behind this film, want everyone to display their enthusiasm for finding Joseph Kony. Let's bring in Fabian. We've let Rosebell has had to go for the moment, but we will bring her back. Fabian says he's inspired by the Invisible Children film and he set up a Stop Kony campaign in Amsterdam. Hi there, good to speak to you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Tell us why you've been so inspired.
We've been inspired, well, myself and my friends were inspired in the beginning because this isn't just the regular campaign like demanding aid, demanding money or water or anything else, just saying, okay, we have a consisting network. It exists. It's bigger than everything you can imagine, like in a war or in an army. And it exists. And it's like very fast. It's fast moving. And the focus is now on get rid of Kony. Sure, right now. But we can show and we can see now how fast in 48 hours we have like millions of people watch the movie, getting awareness and creating a voice. One voice worldwide saying get rid of Kony, and we can see, governments can see that we care. And this is the first time like a social media revolution, you can say. It's the first time it's happened so fast. And that's the big difference.
Salome, a quick response?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I wanted to interject anyways. I think, you know, the focus is on that in the global north or in the west, right? When I was in Uganda, their demands and priorities are different. Their focus is on rebuilding their communities, on, again, as I said, on advancing the same technology that we're using to revolutionize the way people think about their engagement in this country. They want access to that technology so that we can hear from them, so that they can rebuild their lives, so that they can have better access to jobs and so on.
Well,
so
it would be very interesting.
Their priorities are different.
It would be very interesting. I don't know if it's possible really to break down that 50 million views on YouTube and say where were the 50 million and to see how many of them were in East Africa and how many were in North America. All of you, hold your thoughts for the moment because we've got a break coming up. I can see calls from Canada, Libya, Latvia, Tanzania, Angola, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and Ethiopia. So lots to fit in, but we will pause just for a couple of minutes. But stay tuned. We'll be back and we'll be live here on BBC World News. Hi, Ros Atkins. Thanks for joining me on World Have Your Say. We're talking about Joseph Kony, the leader of the Lord's Resistance Army, and that film which so many of you have watched, part of this Stop Kony 2012 campaign. Ali Abdi in Kenya on our Facebook page says, it's not just about Kony. The Ugandan government should also take responsibility for its share of the brutality. And actually on the Invisible Children website, they acknowledge that there have been concerns about the Ugandan government too. But here is an interesting point. I wonder if we can bring in Fabian back in from Amsterdam, because Fabian, here's a message from Carlos on our Google Plus page saying, using social networking as a propaganda machine scares me. Millions of people support the views of one person without questioning it, without actually knowing what the real facts are. Do you have any concerns about reacting so fast to a film made by one charity with one view?
Yeah, I can respond to that because we as an organization behind the Kony 2012 campaign have actually looked into the facts and looked into the difference between the IC and the campaign, because we as organization focus on the Kony 2012 campaign, saying there's a man acting horrifying against children globally, as in seeing the images for children worldwide, it's terrifying. And it's a stepping stone. It's a beginning saying, okay, we as the biggest network in the world can make a voice, can make a signal to the governments worldwide. It is urgent. And you can build schools in Uganda, in Africa. You can build houses and educate children. But if they, in the end, get raided and robbed and raped...
So you say this is a reasoned decision, not just a snap decision. Thanks for speaking to us, Fabian. You're in Amsterdam. Musa, you're in London. Let's bring you and some of the others back in. Do you have any concerns that people are getting on board with this campaign without really understanding it? Musa?
Yes, I do have those concerns because I feel there are several key omissions from the video. Ultimately, don't get me wrong, ultimately I'm very glad there's some awareness raised of what happened, even if it's historic in terms of what the LRA was doing in Uganda. If I can just highlight very quickly the key omissions, the failure to mention any other grassroots organisations in Uganda doing important work, the failure to mention Museveni, even though his role in this is absolutely integral to any kind of long-term solution to the Kony problem. I think that's vital. At the same time, I'm very, very glad and encouraged by the fact that so many young people have got in touch with me on Twitter at my Twitter handle.
All right, so you do approve of it, but you say let's give more information. Jane, you're a comedy writer in Nairobi at the moment. Just briefly, if you would, do you think that people buying into this campaign are actually informed enough to properly support it?
Well, I'm just amazed that all these people are so worried about everyone else who's, you know, saying, well, obviously I understand it, but, you know, there's all these people, you know, less educated and stupider than me who couldn't possibly get a handle on it, and they're probably going to go out and start a war. It's just absolute nonsense. People are always offended on behalf of other people stupider than themselves. Everyone's bright enough to hit the Google button.
Right.
Thank you very much, Jane. And that will be the last comment on today's World Have Your Say. Salome, I can see you there. I wish I had time to get you to respond as well. Perhaps we can pick up some more of your thoughts on Twitter or on Facebook. But to all of you for getting in touch, thank you very much indeed. I think we could have talked for another hour quite easily. Do go to facebook.com/World Have Your Say if you'd like to stay involved. In 2 hours' time, you'll be able to listen to World Have Your Say on the radio, BBC World Service Radio. You can tune in at bbcworldservice.com, and I'll speak to you here on BBC World News in a couple of hours.